Thank you. Welcome to this afternoon's Committee of the Whole Finance, Administration, and Communications meeting starting at 4:30. All council members are in attendance. I am chairing in place of Councilmember Fields, who is joining us online, as well as Councilmember Anderson online. Today we have 5 items on the agenda, and I will kick it off with approval of 2 consultant service agreements for on-call communications and public outreach.
Good afternoon, Council. Lisa Maher, Deputy Director for the Executive Department. I have before you 2 consultant service agreements that are for on-call communications and outreach. They are both 2-year agreements and are capped at $75,000 annually each. We recently went out for an RFP for this service. We received 9 applications, and the panel chose these 2. One is a vendor we have had for this in the past, Jefferson Associates. We've had on-call contracts for these 2 bodies of work since 2017. So this isn't a new thing, just the contracts were expired, so it was time to go out for RFP. The other is a new vendor, Cascadia Consulting Group. They're, I believe, Redmond 2050. I should have asked Mr. Churchill sitting behind me. I believe they used Cascadia for a small project during outreach for Redmond 2050. So they've been used a little bit by certain divisions in the city, but have not ever been a larger vendor for us, like here presented tonight. These each would have 1 additional 2-year renewal term for a maximum total term of 4 years. Both contracts are intended to support and augment our existing citywide communications and community outreach. They will focus, or usually focus on things like neutral facilitation of focus or stakeholder groups, communication, standard operating procedures for different departments or divisions have used this contract for that. Communication engagement plan that we did in 2018, we utilized the on-call for the outreach and facilitation of that stakeholder group. Sometimes emergency communication messaging or design depending on the scope of the emergency and how much time we have. If it's something that we need just real quick, need help on, we may go after this. And then any informational material design, printing, and distribution that may come up suddenly or requires like door-to-door outreach, like door knocker, hangers, that type of thing, we may reach out for this. We have had years where we don't use the contracts. They are just there, not tied to any specific account or budget, so they're open to all divisions and departments at their discretion for approved budgeted funding would be applied to this. So it would have to be existing in their budgets that you've already approved. I am asking to move this to consent on the October 15th business meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Council President Kritzer.
Thank you. I think, overall, this is great to be able to have this available to us on contract and on call when we need it. One of the areas that I think is really important is the emergency communication, messaging, and design. I didn't see in the scopes of work that specifically or kind of crisis communication support called out. And just curious about that since, we've had the need for that at various times. I'm curious what conversations you've had with them about the potential scope and how much you believe of these 2 consultants that they have the capacity to address, especially as like emerging community issues come up, not just, a pandemic type of crisis, but also maybe it's just around a policy issue.
I believe these are the right 2 consultants for the latter part of your question for community outreach, community extra messaging, community crises, small things, smaller project-based things that come up. I do not believe these are who we would go to for a crisis communication need. for emergency, I meant, do we have some quick translation we need? Do we have an infographics that we need that we don't currently have in our database? We have gone out earlier this year for crisis communication providers. We are going to go out again because we believe we maybe didn't have it written correctly, but we didn't get a great response for just crisis communications. So that would be larger emergency things, public relations, cyber security attacks, those type of bigger issues. So we are working to re-release that one that would address that type of emergency that will also be an on-call. And that's one we have not had before. We've always just had this level.
Yeah, I have surmised that, and I would say excited about this, so not to go off topic, but I will look forward to you hopefully bringing us that contract, because I think having an experienced PR crisis communications firm just available for us should the need come up is important, given even what we've experienced in the 5 years I've been on this council. Thanks.
Completely agree.
Thank you. Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. When I was reading it, my question was similar to Council President Kritzer's, in that not seeing, like there's a lot of gray in between what these services are and what's within the scope of work and crisis. We think now that we've seen things like COVID pandemic, most definitely a crisis. We're seeing, recently in the news right now, of course, the hurricanes in the south, definite crisis. There's so much gray area in between this scope of work and that level of crisis. And, do we have a plan in place, or when can we either amend the scope of work or have some type of understanding of what that protocol is? And I wasn't clear, but it sounds like it's something that we're evolving with.
That might be why we didn't get a good response on the crisis communication. So the clarity between the two and what the difference between this on-call type of contractor and a crisis one, which is more focused on a larger crisis like you're talking about, but also has a stronger PR element that this does not have. This is really just an augmentation of the services we already provide internally. The crisis communication consultant will be for larger, more sudden types of emergencies that we just can't handle, or also don't have the PR capabilities that we need for the city to support that type of effort. So yes, we've experienced where we have needed it and we've cobbled things together, but that will be the clear distinction between these. So augmenting existing services we offer internally. Crisis communication will be something separate that offers stronger PR and more experience specifically in those types of crises, whether they be a natural disaster, personal crises, whatever might come up, cybersecurity, that's on my mind because we just did some tabletop, but it's also happening in the community as well.
Well, I'm happy to have this go to consent, and I'm glad that we're looking at how we can flex as we grow as a city.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I will just say I'm in support. It looks like everyone else good for consent. Yes. Awesome. And I was reading through the proposal for the next budget cycle, so excited to look at that when it comes forward too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have award of construction contract for the Northeast 40th Street Sidewalk Repair Project, 156th Avenue to Bell Red Road. We have Vanjie Garcia joining us.
Good evening, Council. Well, today we're talking about Northeast 40th sidewalk repair on the north side of the street between 156 and Bell Red. And if you've ever been there, you know why we are doing this project. So Steve can give a little bit more detail about the contract.
Good afternoon, Council. Steve Gibbs, Capital Construction. As Vanjie said, north side of Northeast 40th from 156 all the way down to Bell Red. significant tree impacts to the sidewalk for sure, and then also there'll be some curb and gutter replacement as well. The trees will be removed. Some positive news on the trees. In your memo, it says 59. We were able to meander the sidewalk a little bit in a couple of areas, and so the actual number is actually 49. There's also about 70-plus trees that we'll be protecting on the backside of the sidewalk. Most of those are private property trees. Let's see, as far as tree mitigation, there's really no space along that stretch to plant new trees, and so we'll be paying into the tree mitigation funds about $31K from the project to plant trees elsewhere in the city. And we're opening bids on Thursday, and if there are no issues, we should be able to send the council out an email early next week with the results. And if there are no issues with the bidding, we would ask to be on consent for November 4th. Happy to take any questions. I also have project manager Aaron Noble online.
Great. Any questions from council? Council President Kritzer.
So in the document that you gave us, the project is proposed to increase by about $1.1 million total from the budget?
Yeah, so the original project was scoped from 162nd to Bell Red. When we started doing our initial scoping, we noticed that there were trees from 162nd up to 156 in basically the same situation. And we went through an internal process to add that scope to the project. And that's the delta in the project information sheet there, about 1.5-ish.
And how many trees are we talking about?
So it's 49 trees that will be removed.
For the whole project.
Okay. And what you're proposing is that you'll email us the proposed contract before it would go to consent?
Yes, the bid results, and then if you want our full contract, I wouldn't advise it, but we could certainly provide that.
Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Gibbs. And of course, Deputy Director Garcia. My question is, of course, we're always looking at the budget and saying, wow, okay, so that went up. However, understanding capital projects and knowing if we were to do this in 2 jobs after running the scope and seeing, no, we actually need to extend this past. Have you run the numbers where initially, of course, we're seeing the increase in it, but if we were to have done this in 2 separate jobs, what that cost would have been?
Yeah, I don't really have that number offhand. We could run an analysis, but definitely you're paying, 2 mobilizations and duplicate paying on some of those kind of general erosion control and that type of those lump sum items.
Yeah, so just for absolute clarity for anybody who's listening then, that it's fair to say that after scoping it, we realized that it was much larger than, and we would have needed to either have 2 separate projects or increase the budget by over $1 million.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
I would also add, Councilmember Nova Camina, that the primary goal of this project is to have an accessible route. And the first route, if you just go with 162nd all the way to Bell Red, then if the goal is to have a ADA compliant route, we still had the issue between 162nd and 156. So it's better to do it all at one and design it because it's a sidewalk and it's not a change in scope. Where we are saving money is that other area that wasn't included would have been to our concrete crew, or somebody would have requested maintenance on that route anyway.
Yeah,
So
thank
it's
you
good
for
to know.
focusing not just to tick something off and say, yes, from this point to this point is now ADA compliant up to transit.
And you have to cross the street.
And you got to cross the street. So thank you very much for being kind of results focused on that and outcome focused. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields.
Thank you. Always in favor of efficiencies. So this is the 22-23 budget money that you're using, correct?
I'm not sure on that.
I'm thinking it is 23, 24. and everyone is nodding on the director's side.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
this
yeah.
one.
Sorry, I meant that. 23, 24. Are we in 24? Is that what year we're in? Yes. So what went down? What are you not going to do, or what are you going to delay out of this biennium into the next?
So how we approached this, we also had Cleveland sidewalks on this year's work plan, and we deferred that work to free up the money to do this, complete the 40th. And then the plan for Cleveland was to approach with the concrete crew, and I just walked it with the concrete crew last week. And so we have a plan to kind of take the worst spots at Cleveland and prepare and repair those prior to the light rail opening.
And that will use the next biennium budget, correct?
I think we have enough funds right now to do to cover the concrete crew work.
Yes, we do. And I would just like to highlight the conversation about Cleveland Street is we had internal conversations that that stretch of Cleveland that needs ADA compliant work is a good candidate for all the development that's coming. And so it was a conversation, do we do a lot of work now and move the curb when, if we just wait a little bit longer, this work will be done by a developer, hopefully because of what's happening around. We have, Steve tells me a lot of stories that we've been waiting a while on that street, but it became an opportunity when the conversation of 40th happened, which is also another street that has been needing this work for a long time as well.
No, and I think I understand that. I just want to make sure I understand. And here's what I believe I heard, that you have enough money in the 23-24 budget not to delay that Cleveland work, so that you need new budget in the 25-26. And so this additional scope for the $1 million that you talked about is primarily funded out of savings rather than a reduction in scope of work?
I believe so, yes.
But you do understand what I'm asking,
Yes,
correct?
yes, we're paying for the savings from the work that we're not spending on Cleveland Street.
I'm sorry, on what?
The Cleveland Street CIP project.
Right, but that's my question. You're still going to do the Cleveland Street under the 23-24 budget, if I heard the answer correctly, and that you're not postponing that into a new biennium.
Well, let me just clarify. We are doing the ADA improvements on Cleveland Street. The proposed cross-section for Cleveland Street requires the curb to be moved, and that's moving a lot of driveways, and that's where it's, internally, we had the conversation, it would be nice to have waited to have a developer actually at the table to rebuild those sidewalks, but we want to make it ADA compliant. Now it is also a need. So what we can do now is we can do an interim project now, since it's been waiting for a long time, so that we can wait a little longer for a developer to come. So the ADA compliant project.
And I am not questioning the logic of any of these decisions. I'm just trying to clarify that, in fact, in order to have the funds to do this work, this new scope that came up, additional length of tree line, that you are using money in the 23-24 budget by delaying some scheduled work into a new biennium. And I don't have a problem with that. I just want to, that's my question. Is that what you're doing in it? Sometimes I hear yes, and sometimes I hear no.
So yes, there will be,
Okay.
if we ever want to rebuild the Cleveland Street to the full proposed cross-section as it is in the comprehensive plan and the transportation master plan, that would likely be a future project on the CIP, but we will be fixing, addressing ADA issues this year.
Got it. The only thing I ask is that we document we have that transparency so that we know, we on council or future council knows that when work didn't get done, there was a reason for it, and that we've made these decisions with full understanding and transparency. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council President Kritzer.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the street tree removal, 59 trees is, I think, going to have a lot of notice from residents in that area. And I know I saw in the memo that you said you're working on flyers, posters, social media. I think since this is a really sensitive issue, if possible, it'd be great for the council to be able to see some of those communications before they go out, just to be able to share some feedback. I know there's just been a couple items recently sharing out about some of the things the city are doing, and we often hear the feedback from the public on these types of things or have a good sense. So if that's at all possible, I'd love for us to be able to see it, just because this is, I think, an important one to message on. I think in particular to emphasize that we are making a tough choice, right? But we're committing to our ADA plan and making sure that these sidewalks can be accessible for everyone. So I just want to make sure that we can tell that story in an effective way, and hopefully just make sure we could have some council feedback on it if possible. It's just a request.
Well, we already have sent things out with cooperation with communications, because we knew that we had to get out up front about this project. Steve and Aaron's team have been meeting directly with the property owners, so that was not something to review, but they've been having one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, and I think the request isn't for the property owners, since it sounds like you've been working with them, but more when we start removing 59 trees, how we let the public know about the project, what's happening in this corridor, because people throughout Redmond will see it and they will have questions. So that part of, like, if we're going to do a social media post on this, I think being able to make it clear kind of what the intention is and the public benefit that we're going for would be really important.
Sure, we can get you a copy of the postcard that we've mailed, and then we're kind of taking a similar approach that we did at Grass Lawn. We've fabricated some site-specific signs in the tree areas, and then we've also augmented our website explaining tree selection, the structural soil that we've talked about before, and we could certainly get you a link to that website, and you could see what we put on the website.
Sure.
Thank you. And just to be clear, it's 49 trees, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Thank
just
you.
for
We saved
anybody
10
listening.
trees just like that.
The memo says 59.
It does,
You're
but
correct.
Mr. Gibbs alerted us that they were able to save 10 trees in the process in his opening remarks, and I appreciate that, because that was my question. How many trees were we able to save? And I will say that, yes, the signage at Grass Lawn has been very effective. I've seen that signage when I go walking in that park, so thank you for that. I look forward to seeing that in this area too.
Well, something that we are implementing, because we just got it finished with communications this week, is we're incorporating, because a lot of projects in public works may or may not affect trees for different reasons. So we have a tree form, and we can send a copy of that. And so whether it's a concrete crew, whether it's a CIP project, there'll be a tree notice on each tree. So when people are walking, the people who are right there, kind of where we took the example from Grass Lawn, so they know that some trees are going to stay, some trees are not, and that was a more direct way to announce.
Thank you. The only question that I had was, are there any other shade mitigation techniques that we can employ for that sidewalk area? I know you said that trees aren't a viable object. Is there other greenery we could do?
I would say that the private trees that are right on the property line are quite substantial.
Okay.
We've actually gotten feedback from some of the property owners that they're actually glad that the street trees are going to get a little more sun in there for the existing vegetation. So I don't think it's going to be as bad as if that was the only tree along that section.
Great, thank you. Any concerns for this going on the November 4th? Oh, did you still have a question? I'm sorry. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the team. I think that you've implemented a lot of new things with the grass lawn project and you're applying them here. I think that you're already quite successful in implementing the new communication just based on how infrequently I have been asked about the grass lawn project. So I think communication, folks really understand what we're trying to do here, and I think it's working. So thanks so much for integrating that. The only thing I would flag for the chair, the request is to put something on consent that we haven't seen yet. So just curious how you'd like to handle that outside of our normal process.
Yes, I was aware of that difference in this contract scoping. So is anyone objecting to this going on consent, or would we rather see it on new business? Those for consent? And those for new business? I'm looking at our online folks to be the tiebreakers here. Council President Kritzer?
I guess I'm not ready to put it on consent since we haven't seen the contract. So we could even just see it in committee again because I think it's proposed for November 4th.
Yes, that is. Ms. Garcia, how would you feel to proceed for this one? Do you want to bring it back to a committee?
We were waiting for your answer. So either way is fine by us. So do you want to go to committee?
TPW that day and then business that night? Sure.
We can
Okay.
still email everyone when we receive the bids.
All right, Councilmember Stewart, do you think you could handle this on 2PW?
I'm unsure because November 4th is the date requested for action on this. So if other council members have room on their committees at the end of this month, that could be one avenue for pursuit. Otherwise, we can just put it on new business.
I'm going to say for time's sake, let's just put it on new business.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fields, did you have something on that?
I was going to make that suggestion. Just once you have two people who don't want it on consent, best thing to do in my mind is put it on new business.
Great, thank you. We'll see that on new business on November 4th.
Thank you.
And next up, we have the 2025-2026 budget process monthly update with Director Cochran.
Good afternoon, Council. I have with me today Haley Zurcher. She is our interim financial planning manager. 4 updates for you today: community engagement, documents for the budget process, some work on business licensing, as well as an update on our technology projects. I will start off with a community engagement update, and Haley, if you want to go ahead and pull up the SharePoint site while I'm doing that. The update is on the questionnaire that we have out. At this point, we have approximately 180 responses. Of those responses, 82% are so far in strong alignment with our community's budget priorities, as well as the outcomes that are sought. That's up a little bit from the last budget by about 2%, but we'll be collecting these responses throughout the month of October. If we continue to find a lot of interest in the questionnaire, we'll keep it open to continue to collect information. So when it comes to the budget, council's budget review, we are placing documents, resources for you on SharePoint. We will also be providing you updates and responses that we provide throughout the budget process via the SharePoint site. I'll let Haley give you a tour, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the process for providing you information, responses from questions from council deliberation evenings, just about times that we'll provide the updates, when we'll kind of cut it off to ensure that everyone has time to review and feel informed in the meeting that night. But I'll give Haley a chance to tour all the work she's been up to.
Okay, good evening. So As Kelly mentioned, we are providing this information just so it can be in one place and a little bit easier for you all to navigate. When you open the documents, the first folder, you'll see a lot of options here. The resources that are currently available to you are in several of these folders. We have the forecast information that has been presented in meetings previously. We have some results teams information as well. So you will find the civic results team presentations that have been shared with you, recommendations that came out of the civics results team, as well as similar information for the staff results teams. I am kind of just going through these briefly, but if you would like me to stop and explain anything, please do let me know. So first, we'll have a lot of resources available for you to kind of see these documents that helped us develop the preliminary budget, as well as the preliminary budget documents themselves. So in this folder, we do have the preliminary budget summary, which is a little bit more of a consolidated version of the preliminary budget. But if a 500-page document is more your speed, we also have the preliminary budget book available as well. Included here in this folder is the Excel version of the line item budget. So if you would like to see some more details, of what is actually included in the budget line by line, that is available here as well. And it's available with filters, and you'll be able to kind of explore all of that. And then we've also parsed out the fiscal policy and the long-range financial strategy, which are both currently redlined with the finance department's recommended changes, with the intent to finalize these with the adopted budget. So what's to come here is we will have in the adopted budget documents, it's currently empty, but we will include resolutions and ordinances and the final budget document once that is available. And I also wanted to show the deliberations folder. We have folders for every night. They are currently empty, but when the time comes, every folder will have the PowerPoint presentation for the night, and we'll also include any questions or discussion points that we know of in advance and that will be for the first one, and then for any subsequent evenings, we will include any follow-up items from the previous deliberation night. So all of that information will be available ahead of time, all in one place, and I think that will do it.
For the council questions or requests for information, sort of matrix that we keep track of, what I like to recommend is that on a daily, like Monday through Friday, weekends off, that we provide you, we'll just save an update of what we have at noon each day, so you'll know that if we had information, it was updated at noon. On the day of our meetings, we will update again at 4 o'clock. Everything that we've been able to gather through the day. We'll save a version up through that point, and it will go into the council deliberations file, and that will be the updates that we will review and make sure that everyone is okay with that evening. So you'll have the presentation, which largely follows the budget summary report, and then the matrices. Does that timing work?
Council President Kritzer.
Overall, that sounds like a good plan. I would suggest in terms of what we lock before the meeting in which we're going to be having the discussion would be the day before at 4 o'clock if possible, just so that way you don't spend time on things that council members don't have time to read. But I know the timing might be a little tricky.
Yeah. Definitely will be our goal. And if I see that a lot came in after that time frame. We can cut it off at 4 the day before. If I see that a lot came in, I'll just check in with council leadership if we want to try to get it in or not.
Right. I mean, and it would take our understanding that
Yeah.
if you ask a question or if something comes in within that day, you're not going to see it show up that night. You'll have to wait till the next budget meeting or, the next time it gets updated.
Hoping to get
my
you
opinion,
information
though.
as quickly as possible so this isn't even an issue. Like, we just know.
Any other questions on process? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Looking forward to the process. Director Cochran, you asked us for, early feedback of this new version of the budget summary, and I just want to say it's looking great. That was super helpful, so thanks so much for kicking us off that way. I have a question about, I'm really glad we're talking about the fiscal policies and look forward to reading the red line. What day will we review that? It actually wasn't been called out in our schedule.
So it is, what we'll do is before adoption, so kind of the last night when we're wrapping things up, we will review the fiscal policy recommendations, make sure we're all in agreement. I think that what I would like to do is provide kind of one walkthrough at FAC in November, and just at that point kind of make sure we're all okay with the things that I have recommended or the updates that Haritha has recommended, kind of sign off on everything that we can in November, and then anything that council has to add in between then and council adoption, we'll make sure that everyone's in agreement with before we do council adoption. My recommendation, to be very frank, on these two documents is that they are work plan items for 2025 for council, for finance to help facilitate that update. So, I'm going through this update, and it is, it's in need, that especially the long-range financial strategy, it is very much in need of a refresh. There is a lot that council has done, and it's appropriate in the fact that it speaks to all important concepts and philosophies and the connections and alignment that we need to have. But I think they could be stronger. I think we have an economic strategic plan. I think that there are some stronger connections we can make. It is largely influenced by budgeting by priorities or budgeting by outcomes being a new thing. And it just is now. It is sort of the process that we have evolved into. So I would like to sort of figure out a way to update that more robustly with council than we can during a budget year, because it's either like we got to do it right before because it sets the foundation, or at the end and hope to capture things. So it's totally legit, legal. It sets the framework for us. I'd like to elevate it and see it set the strategic framework for us going forward. So it does a good job of maintaining and protecting us. I think that we've done a lot of thoughtful work with intention around implementing some pretty significant things. So I just would like to see that strengthened. The fiscal policies, they have been built over years, over different directors. They sometimes speak different, languages, different levels of details. I would certainly really appreciate the opportunity to finesse those as well with council in a process that gives us enough time to sort of walk through each section so you have assurance of where everything went and landed. So that would be my recommendation. I would appreciate a review now. Anything that's critical, totally interested in. And like I said, it's appropriate, but could definitely set the stage better.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I would be happy to take on those items in a bigger way. And I think that the council expressed earlier in the year a significant interest in the next biennium, really being able to dig in to the budget outcome and performance indicators early in the process too. So I'm hearing a couple of great bodies of work that we could definitely work on together next year. As for this year, I appreciate the chance to look at the financial policies early in the month or earlier in the process at whatever committee that needs to be. Just as a council member who's been through the budget process one singular time, it can be very helpful for our colleagues who are doing it for the first time to get that that firm grounding in the policies that are guiding our budget. So earlier the better is all I have to say, and really appreciate your response on that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting discussion. So, Director, I acknowledge and understand and agree that by doing the budget, looking at the critical issues on policies, and then using early next year to really look through it and make sure that we've caught up to all of the things that you described, including some of your new reporting tools. What I would ask, and you don't necessarily need to give me an answer tonight, but I would like an answer at some point. If while we're doing that, will we also, I know that council can insist on this, but would you acknowledge that we would be open to a first quarter budget reconciliation if some of the things that we decide on actually impact the budget? And I'm not even thinking in terms of changing the amounts necessarily, but potentially expenditure restrictions as part of the budget process may, as we uncover things or determine ways to strengthen the oversight of the budget, we may want to implement expenditure restrictions post-budget. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that as we go through the review of either the long-range financial strategy and different ways that we may want to approach our work, or the financial fiscal policies and how we control it, if there is something that we want to implement, we should. I mean, if it's something that is effective in reducing our risk and either impacts our budget in a way that we can mitigate or doesn't impact the fiscal part of the budget, then there is definitely room and support to do that.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Council President Kritzer.
I would just add my support for Councilmember Stewart's proposal that we just look at this a little earlier in the process, just in case any particular ideas come up. I know Councilmember Anderson had put in a hopper item related to these documents as well, so I just think it'd be good for us to see those a little sooner rather than have the conversation the last night of the budget. So by the time we get to the last night, where most of it's wrapped. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you.
So agenda for the first evening of council process review will at this point look like a check-in on the revenue forecast. So if anything has changed since the study session on September 24th, any updates to the business technology program or the capital investment program that have occurred that you need to be aware of. And then we will start with reviewing the first service enhancement package in healthy and sustainable budget priority. The other thing that we are working on in sort of parallel with the budget review for council is sort of a request to look at our business license ordinance and some of the regulations in there. So we are currently looking at, for example, the exemption amount and working through some recommendations that we can bring forward to council as part of this budget process. We'll be bringing forward the research that we've put together, particularly about work that's going on at AWC and a recommendation that they're moving forward, how that impacts us, as well as some recommendations that we will have put together by November FAC timeframe. Some will be revenue neutral. There may be a revenue neutral type of consideration that council would like to make, and I'll provide some options for doing that as well. So if there is any other requests in that area or anything else that you would like to know about prior to that FAC meeting, let me know. The next update is in regards to technology program. We are implementing the utility portion of the credit card fee recoupment process in October. Expect the rest to wrap up in December. Wanda Norman, our project manager, will be joining us in November for an update as well. But we do have a lot of communication going out. So if you hear anything or think that there's anything that we need to have attention on, please let me know. We've tried to communicate in as many different formats as we can, but tend to miss someone. So anything that we can do to strengthen that, let me know. Last thing I'm going to throw on there is one agenda item after mine today, number 5, from the planning director, Carol Helland, in regards to some refund requirements for development fees. I wanted to let you know that I think that this conversation is also something that we may need to consider in parallel with the budget in order to implement some of her suggested solutions as part of that. It's not required, but maybe the easiest way to get that taken care of. So I'll join Carol for that piece, but just wanted to let you know that there may be some other pieces coming that will connect to the budget once we get done.
Great.
So any other questions,
Thank you.
concerns?
Any more questions on the budget process? Great. All right, we're running a little behind, so I'm going to move us right along. Thank you so much. We have 14 minutes to get through 2 more items that are both slated for 15 minutes each, so we can do this. Next up is Redmond 2050 Final Planning Commission recommendations for adoption 2024, and Jeff Churchill is joining us, along with Director Helland.
Good evening, and thank you. Good evening, council members. Jeff and I are here to follow up on a conversation that you started on September 24th. You were almost through the Planning Commission recommended package. We had 3 outstanding issues. If you recall, you requested that those issues be forwarded to a committee of the whole for consideration because they were short and we thought the responses would be pretty straightforward. So I am here with Jeff this evening for us to walk through those 3 issues and then hopefully get consensus on how to move forward so that we can continue to prepare for adoption in November.
Thanks, Carol. And those 3 are electric vehicle infrastructure requirements, carbon tracking, and a wording change related to open space, which actually you did not discuss on September 24th, but that came up between then and now that we wanted to bring to your attention. And if it's okay, I'd just suggest that we take them in turn. So beginning with the electric vehicle charging infrastructure requirements, just to recap, staff recommended removing a line of zoning code language that says that there is no minimum number of EV stalls required in new developments, because that's no longer accurate because the building code does require some amount of charging infrastructure in some types of development. Council members were interested in exploring setting standards for such infrastructure that go above and beyond what the building code requires. And in your issues matrix beginning on page 25, staff has supplemented the prior response with new information, including definitions that were asked for, information about EV adoption in Redmond and statewide, cost implications, the data that we collect and don't collect, and a discussion of equity and maintenance considerations. So there's a lot to consider. The Planning Commission is already poised to consider the Green Building Program and the 2025 code package, and to us it made sense to fold this into their work program so that they can analyze, evaluate, hold a hearing, collect information, and send you a recommendation in the first quarter of 2025, which is going to be fast upon us in any case. And that would allow you to review that recommendation in Q1 and Q2. In the meantime, the incentives that are already proposed for Overlake would continue to go forward, but would be superseded by any requirements that you would establish in 2025.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you so much. I have a question about the code package, and I'm sorry I don't have the cool timeline graphic in front of me, but those code packages that if we send this back to the Planning Commission and they study it, would we be looking at adoption of that package in June of
Probably April.
April of 2024, so
Yes.
just a few months from now.
2025.
Okay. Excuse me, yes, I've been doing that all day, 2025. Okay, that's actually really helpful to me. I'm very comfortable having the Planning Commission take a look at this again or include it in their work, and particularly for them to evaluate for us and bring forward a recommendation about how best to balance our need to welcome more electric vehicles with our existing principles on parking that are represented in the comprehensive plan. I think the balance of those two is a little tricky, and having them do the hearings and the outreach and study, I think, could be really helpful for us to have something just 4 months after the new year. I think that's worth waiting for. Thank you.
Council President Kritzer.
I'm also okay with waiting for the Planning Commission to do this. I do think the EV readiness and the discussion around that, I think, is important, because once you build a building, like redoing the wiring seems like that's the biggest hurdle versus actually, getting the box, right? So I do think this is something that I'll look forward to the Planning Commission looking at. My only question with the comp plan is there anything that we would need to have in wording in the comp plan that would then support, should the Planning Commission want to come forward with a more robust recommendation?
I don't think so. PSRC and Vision 2050 actually has a policy about electric vehicle charging infrastructure that essentially mandates that local cities include policy around that in their plan. So we have it in our plan. So that would support whatever direction the commission whatever recommendation the commission provides to the council.
So they could increase what we have under that. Great. Okay.
Councilmember Saladin.
Yep, thank you. Really appreciate you bringing this back with a lot more information. One of the statistics that I had never seen was in 2023, 24% of new vehicle registrations in our zip code 98052 were for battery electric vehicles, compared to the statewide average of 11 or number of 11%. So I agree with my colleagues. I think I feel comfortable with the Planning Commission going forward, but would love continued discussion about this and the readiness of EVs across our city, not just in developments as well.
Thank you. And since this was my item, I will comment as well that as much as I don't want to push this off until next year, I understand the need to push it off until first quarter. So I appreciate the plan that you brought forward as proposed. And move on to the next one. Yeah.
Thank you. So the second item was carbon tracking. Councilmember Fields had asked staff to verify that carbon tracking would be feasible as proposed and as would be required in Overlake. In summary, the requirement to track embodied carbon will be limited to the top 3 most carbon-intensive building materials, which are steel, concrete, and insulation. And those limits were established based on the feedback during the Planning Commission review process. And in the Green Building Program appendix, staff has actually provided links to embodied carbon calculators that are out there available to use. One of them is specific to low-rise development, and another one is free. So we think that with the limitations on which materials and the availability of calculators, that it is feasible and reasonable as proposed.
Any questions? All right, seeing none.
Okay. Third one is the one that you didn't talk about on September 24th. This has to do with things called Ps and POPs. So what are those? Staff was using the term privately owned public spaces, POPs, to mean 2 different things. POPs, as described in the park plan, are very much like public parks. They go through a planning process. They operate under park rules. However, the POPs, as used in the open space chapter of the zoning code that you reviewed, are not those things. They are smaller. They do not meet public park planning requirements. They're not like public parks. They're smaller open spaces. Therefore, we're proposing using a different term for those smaller amenity spaces, publicly and accessible enhanced amenity spaces, or Ps, so that we don't have too many vowels. The substance of the open space requirements would not change, just the name would change to distinguish it from POPs. So we would bring the red lines to 2136, which is the open space chapter, back to you at your committee meeting on November 4th, which is when we're already planning to be there to show you everything else as it would be adopted, so that you can see it. But in essence, it's a name change.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I'm very comfortable with the name change and having it on November 4th when we're reviewing everything else. I do have a question about, we just adopted recently the park plan, which referred to the Ps as the POPs. And anyway, just what's the process of making sure the walk back to existing plans and policies? What does that look like, or how do you all manage that?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
In actuality, the staff, when they were talking about the code, were talking about two different things. It's clear in the parks plan. So the parks plan was talking about POPs. Those are like the park, like in Overlake for Estera Park, where there's a development agreement, and like Jeff said, it's governed by park rules. Those are require additional negotiation between the city and the property owner. The Ps really are something different. They're open space that a developer has agreed to amenitize to allow for maybe a flower cart or for some outdoor recreation like a permanent ping pong table or something like that. And when the staff, the park staff and the planning staff were working together on this, they were using the same term to mean two different things. So the POPs, as described in the park plan, are still that. The Ps are what we agreed on was actually what everyone was talking about.
Great. So we don't have any concern about this particular item needing to be walked back. Okay, great. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. Great change on that one, so appreciate that. All right, I'm going to keep us moving along. Is any other questions on this item before I close it out? All right, moving us right along. Permit fees, refund mandates under state legislation, Senate Bill 5290.
Correct. Good evening again, council members. Carol Helland again, Planning and Community Development Director. So we've been briefing you for many months on the legislative timeline mandates and associated project improvements that we have contracted with Matrix to give us some advice on and recommendations. The Senate bill, just as a reminder, 5290 requires that jurisdictions reimburse applicants when we do not meet timelines that are mandated under the terms of that statute. The city can avoid the impact by adopting 3 additional measures, is how they're called in the code. And I actually provided the whole list of additional measures as an attachment to your materials. And so the purpose of this memo and this presentation was to identify the additional measures that we believed we could implement as part of the 25-26 budget package to insulate the city from having to pay refunds. Developers have told us quite clearly that they don't really want to give the money back, and they don't want to get the money back, and they don't want refunds. They just want us to do better. And so the work that we're doing with Matrix, the consulting that we have on hand, is making some good progress. We have 3 interim reports, and we'll be giving a council an update on that soon. But this mechanism to relieve us from providing refunds is actually to continue to advance our process improvements, because giving a refund would be really antithetical to us making progress, because if we give refunds, we would impact staffing levels. So that's the proposal. The 3 refunds that we have identified with specificity that that Director Cochran described earlier were imposing reasonable fees. We meet that requirement because we did the fee study that Finance led earlier this year and adopted fees. We would propose maintaining and budgeting for on-call permitting assistance. We already have that for structural review because we have been unable to find structural engineering review, so we do contract out for that. And what we're proposing is to expand the scope of that contract to allow us to contract with with other types of reviewers that could backstop land use review and engineering review where necessary. We would actually charge clients for that service, so it is anticipated to be revenue neutral. And then the final one is having new positions budgeted that are contingent on increased permit revenue. That's the one that Kelly and I have been talking about. We generally do not have positions that are unbudgeted or included in an FTE allocation but not funded. So part of the resolution that we'll be adopting for presentation to you would identify what would be the trigger for us to essentially fill a position that was one of those allocated but unfunded to meet increasing demand that we would observe because we were getting increased revenues, and so that we had the revenue to pay to hire more staff. Did you want to add anything to that? So there's nothing in the statute that says we have to essentially do this by resolution. That said, I am a planner, and because people can ask us to refund fees if we miss those timelines, I would like to be able to have the documentation that we believe we've met the additional measures by adopting a resolution that shows these are the 3 things that we adopted in addition to the improvements that we're also making. We believe that there are other improvements on this list that we will be pursuing. We are waiting for input from Matrix, the consultant that we have hired, to help us understand how we fare against best practices for permit review lines of business. And with that information, then we will start prioritizing where we should start first and trying to make progress, because that's all based on the feedback that we've received from our focus groups and our stakeholders. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The plan would be for us to identify these 3 additional measures in a resolution and the triggers that we would use to before going and hiring for those positions, because the revenue would be available to cover for them.
I see Councilmember Fields.
Yeah, well, I guess I have 3 questions. I don't think I understand why a resolution would helps here. I get that you want to document it. I understand that. But it feels to me like it's part of a much bigger ongoing struggle that we've had for a number of years, and that is, how do we, as you pointed out, do our continuous improvement and process improvement. So I'm not sure that I would be in favor of a resolution. I don't see the value in it. What I see a value in is ultimately coming to some place or arrive at some place to say we've resolved a lot of the issues. And I understand that you're working on it, not a criticism. I'm just saying we're not there, and I don't know that council has the benefit of knowing how far we're actually short of being in a place that we are striving to be. The second question is the DRB going to be part of this discussion at some point?
The DRB is separate from this conversation. Actually, the vote on the DRB is scheduled to come back next Tuesday on that approach. So it's one of the things that you've been discussing, but it's not part of this conversation specifically. This is only to insulate us from having to pay refunds. And in actuality, because it would be having new positions budgeted that are contingent on increased revenue, I would think at a minimum that would require a resolution of council, that the council agree with that, so that we have that available and understand how to administer our financial policies.
But you're proposing those positions in the current budget, correct?
Good afternoon. So I believe that what we are looking at is a situation that is similar to the fire overhires that we currently have that help us to mitigate capacity issues in fire. The plan would be to identify additional FTEs assigned to development services work that are essentially approved FTEs that we can move forward quickly with filling so that there are not negative impacts of high capacity to the development community. The idea is to, make hiring more nimble and flexible to meet the demands of what is going on. So it would certainly allow us to get hiring done. The mechanism for that would be a budget adjustment. So although when we adopt the budget, we would be identifying FTEs, bodies that are available to do plan review, and they currently would have no funding. We can move forward with funding them, and Carol may learn that she could, Director Helland may learn that she could absorb it in her budget, but it also may be that she needs to rely on some of those new or increased revenues that we're seeing to help offset it. It also may mean that capacity is crazy and we're not yet seeing the money, but we will. We have reserves set aside for exactly that purpose. And that would also be a budget adjustment that we would bring to council saying, we need to bring in these particular positions to do this body of work. And it would either be a recognition of new revenue or a recognition of reserves until new revenue is available.
So just one clarification, then I'll let other council members ask their questions. Are we talking about a budget adjustment for 23-24?
No.
Or are we talking about passing the budget and then doing a budget adjustment for the 25-26 budget?
What it would look like is passing a budget for 25-26 that identified additional FTEs for development services. To move forward on filling those positions in the next budget, we would be bringing forward budget adjustments for the 25-26 budget. So council will know when the action's been taken, not only because we'll keep you informed, but there would be likely an action needed to support it financially.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I want to double check that I understand. So the excerpt that we have where the three options are highlighted by the staff, is this a list where we would just need any three on this list?
It is just any three, and we've evaluated all of them, and these are the only ones we can meet at this time. And they are aligned with the budget action that you'll be taking in November. Based on the input we received from Matrix, we would look at implementing more of these. And in actuality, if we don't meet timelines regularly, there is another period of time, I believe it's in 5 years, that we have to reassess. And if we're not meeting timelines at that point, the state mandates that we put in additional measures anyway.
I appreciate that. So I appreciate that you've evaluated, and these are the ones we can do right now. I think we're really close on like H, adopting development regulations which make housing types an outright permitted use in all zones where housing type is permitted. We're really close, right?
Actually, because outright permitted, it would mean they just have to comply with regulations and there's really no more review. So you would just have to get a building permit. It means they don't go through land use entitlement.
Okay. So my higher level question then is, say we come up, we adopt three today. A year from now, can we choose a different three to stay in compliance as our systems and processes evolve and get more efficient?
Sure. I think there is nothing that I read in the statute that would prohibit us from selecting different ones and offloading others. The reality is these are more budgeting than actual improvement, and we want to get to improvement. So I think we're going to be wanting to show progress in many of these different areas.
Yeah, thank you.
Council President Kritzer.
Yeah, thank you. One clarification on what you were sharing about with the budgeting. So you would only come back with that budget adjustment should we have the increase in need and then need to fill that position. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Great. So it's not like we'll pass the budget and immediately have to make an adjustment. It would be later into the year when we see how everything's going. Great. So I just wanted to say I would support you coming back with the resolution just to make sure that we can show we've complied. Even if it might be a little over the top, but I think it's good to be over the top when state law is being very prescriptive, and if we're doing our due diligence to follow it. So I'd be happy to see that, and hopefully we could see it at a meeting where we could dig into it, discuss, and ask more questions as well.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, I'll jump in with mine. So I'm looking at letter I, adopting a program to allow for outside professionals and with appropriate professional licenses to certify components of applications consistent with their license. How is that different than the design review board folks that we have?
This is actually the licensing. This doesn't apply to design review boards. This licensing refers to surveyors and structural engineers.
But the folks on the design review board are professionals that are licensed, say architects and such. Mm-hmm. So could that not be extrapolated to those same professionals and that process?
So there's two things here. Yes, I suppose that it could be. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I was looking at J. I understand that you are really wanting to find a way for the design review board to stay intact. This is the design requirements that the state now mandates has no subjective measures that can be in them. The reason to include architects historically for design review boards has been because standards have been very subjective. They have been compatible with surrounding uses. They have been preserving neighborhood character. And those types of objective standards, or those types of subjective standards, have been used to be exclusionary. So we have been putting in place objective standards, and those standards, because it might say it needs to be, setback needs to be 10 feet, not 5 feet. It doesn't require an architect to tell us to certify that that's right or wrong. This is really for licenses, licensure, like the civil engineering provisions that the third-party civil engineers that we're getting, that really we might need structural calculations for the type of a building that we don't traditionally review, and that we want them to be certified consistent with their licensing.
Sure. Okay, just for the sake of time, given that we are nearly at quarter till and we have another meeting at 6:30, I will withhold further comment on this. Is anyone opposed to this being put on consent or being
We're
moved to?
going to bring back a resolution on
November
4th, which is a Monday, at the Planning and Public Works Committee of the Whole. And then we would put it actually for adoption with the rest of the budget package.
Got it. Looking online. Okay. And that brings us to the end of that agenda item, and this meeting is adjourned.